Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing a requested tutorial. It's going to be a skirt that's been requested by Little Crafty Kitty. So this is the skirt. So it's a pleated skirt with a waistband and it has this pom-pom trim on the bottom and it fastens with Velcro. I didn't make this skirt, it was one that I got from AliExpress. It came on a doll. So what you will need is your fabric, your trim, some scissors, either a needle and thread or a sewing machine, some means of fastening your skirt. I've got a little piece of Velcro, and of course the doll you're making your skirt for. Now I don't give measurements. What I'll do is tell you how many times to measure around and things like that so that you can adapt it to fit your doll. To make the main body of your skirt, you need to measure around the widest part of your doll. In my doll's case, it's her thighs just here. You need to measure around there twice loosely. So I've measured around her once loosely to there, and if I double that, that will be twice loosely to there. I'm just going to do a little cut there so that I know how wide I need it to be. And then you need to measure the length. So I want it to go just past her knee, or just to her knee. So I'm going to measure it just past there because I'll need to turn it up, and we'll do a little cut there as well so that we know where to go down to. So on your doll, you do the same thing. Measure around the widest part loosely twice, and then measure from the waist to how long you want it to be and add a little bit for the turn up. So I can see here that I need to cut down here and across there. So let's do that. And because this fabric will fray, I do need to edge it. I need to go all the way around the edges and zigzag to stop it from fraying. So here we are. This bit doesn't need zigzagging, it's already finished, and this is where my waistband is going to go. The next thing we need to do is measure her waist. Now, this is for the waistband, so it needs to fit around her waist. You need to allow a little bit for a seam, and you need to allow a little bit for the gathering of the skirt that's going to go in there. That'll tighten it up a bit as well. So mine's going to come to around there. And then however wide you want your waistband to be. So I want mine to be about this wide, but I need to allow a little bit for sewing. So yeah, and then if I allow like ½ an inch for sewing, that'll be the right, let's check that. That'll be the right width. So I'm going to cut that down. So on your doll, you would do the same. You'd measure around a waist, allow a little bit extra for sewing and for gathering the skirt into. And then decide how wide you want your waistband to be and make it a little bit wider than that to allow for your seam. You're stitching it onto the waistband. So here we are. Let's have a look. We'll have it round the front. Yeah, there's quite a bit there. We can always trim that down if we need to, but you can't. Well, I suppose you can add on to it, but it's easier to trim it down than it is to add on to it. So I'm going to leave it like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is go around both pieces of fabric and zigzag the edges to stop it from fraying, because that will fray. So the next thing we need to do is gather our skirt into our waistband. Start at one end and pin it. And then at the other end, pin it too. Leave a little bit overlapping there. Just a little bit, because you need to be able to stitch that over when you're done. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So leave a little bit over at that end and leave a little bit over at the other end as well. And then we're just going to make little pleats along this fabric. So just little folds like that all the way along, and pin a pin. When you've made your pleat, pin it onto your waistband. Do that all the way along. So make a little pleat. And pin it. Another little pleat. Pin it into position. And just keep going. So this is how I'm doing the little pleats. I'm just doing a little, folding it over like this, like joining it and then just turning that over. That's your little pleat. It's easier to do it this way, and then you know it fits into your waistband, rather than doing it first and then having to adjust it afterwards. So another little fold there. You can do bigger pleats and do less of them. You can do smaller pleats and do more of them. It's entirely up to you. You can just gather it with thread and gather it to fit. However you decide to do it, that's fine. It's entirely up to you. And it'll work either in any of those ways. Okay, so that's my pleats all pinned into position and my waistband pinned where I want to stitch it. I'm going to stitch it just across here. You can see all the pleats on the back there. When you sew it carefully and slowly so that you don't lose your pleats. So hold it like this and make sure that your pleats are in position when you're stitching down there. So once you've done that part, take out your pins. And then we're going to turn this over. Now, turn it over this way first, and you want it to go down a little bit past your waistband. So not quite in half, but a little bit longer at the front than the back. Like this. And we're just going to sew down here, not getting the skirt or the pleats in it. We're just going to sew down there on each end, that's why you left a little bit at the end, and the same on this end. Make sure you've got it the same each end as well. Yep. Either hand or machine sew those ends closed. And then the next thing I'm going to do is turn those through like this, so that your unsewn edge goes to the back of your skirt like this. May just need to poke that out with something. There we go. And then we're going to stitch this part down. I'm going to just trim off the excess I've got in here so that my waistband isn't too bulky. I've got quite a bit extra in mine because I've got that finished edge there, so I'm just going to trim that down. And then the next thing we're going to do is turn that under just a tiny bit. All the way along and pin it just here. Pin it into position like this. So just turn it under a tiny bit. Pin it just level with your stitches or just above, not below where your stitching is. And then I'm just going to do a hand stitch across there to stitch that down. If I hand stitch it, the sewing won't show through the other side, so that's how I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to just stitch this down on the back here so that it's nice and neat and finished off. And I'm just going to catch the back of the waistband there so that it doesn't come through and show on the front. So you can see that I'm stitching above that sewn line there, just to make sure that it's not showing through the front, and I'm actually stitching into the back of the pleats to hold the back of the waistband down. So that's your waistband stitched into place. Now the next thing we need to do is stitch up the back of our dress. So I'm going to sew mine about halfway up. Make sure your waistband matches, and then just sew it to about half to 2/3 of the way up. And then what we're going to do is turn over our hem. Just need to turn it over once like this, pin it into position, just turn it over and pin it all the way around. You can straight stitch that into position too. The next thing we need to do is add our pom-pom trim. You can either stitch it on the outside like this, or you can stitch it on the inside like this. I think I'm going to stitch mine on the inside in this case. So just pin it all the way around, whichever way you want it, and then just stitch it into position. I'm actually going to just stitch mine on without pinning. You could just leave it as it is and not have a trim on it. You could just put some lace on it, anything you want really. You could just sew a piece of black ribbon around the bottom or white ribbon, whatever ribbon matches your fabric. And so now the only thing left to do is add our fastening. So we'll get the skirt on the girl, go around the back, and you can see that I've got room to put a press stud on there or some Velcro. I'm going to fasten mine with a press stud. I'm just going to stitch a press stud onto there. So I hope that was useful to someone. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.